Story 1. The troublesome individuals and their daily antics. At least they do their best to keep the rent affordable. Story 2. I have a neighbor across from me who runs his engine very late at night, from 10:30 to 11:30 p.m., then starts to rev it, making it louder, and plays loud music while sitting in his car. Story 3. My neighbor is a very kind person, but does not understand that we are allowed to be outside our home without having to interact with him. He also does not understand the purpose of fences and regularly comments on what is happening in our backyard. Story 4. I live in the third house from the corner of a major street. Apparently, my house is where you are supposed to park your broken down car until you can fix it or get it towed. This happens at least a couple of times every month. Story 5. Dog owners do not pick up after their dogs. My backyard neighbors have 2 dogs who bark constantly whenever we go outside. The neighbors are trying to correct the dogs. They built a privacy fence, but nothing deters them. I cannot even sit on my back patio with a cup of coffee and a book to read. I tried a couple of different electronic devices, but they have not affected the dogs. Story 6. The elderly population in this small rural town is significant, with many individuals aged 60 and above. They frequently complain about young people leaving or working outside the province. However, they oppose every industry that aims to establish jobs locally, including wind turbines, fisheries, and mining. This contradiction is difficult to understand. Story 7. There are always 2 to 3 cars parked on the street in front of the houses, with either only one or none occupying the driveway. Story 8. Some neighbors moved in across the street, and they are annoying. Cars and trucks are parked on the street, sometimes directly in front of my house because they ran out of space. Their garage and driveway are so filled with junk that they cannot park in them. They cannot even close the garage door, so we just see their cluttered garage all day. They are also inconsiderate of their neighbors. They are noisy people always slamming doors, setting off car alarms, and their child screaming in the front yard. Right now, they are running a shop vacuum, and it has been on for about an hour. Yesterday at 8 a.m., their child got hold of the key fob for one of their vehicles parked in front of my house. He was pointing it out the window to activate the car alarm and kept using the remote starter. This continued for about 20 minutes before his mother finally made him stop. Other than those neighbors, it is a really great neighborhood. Story 9. Rude neighbors who blast their car stereos at all hours of the day and night. Whenever you try to sleep or concentrate on something, they come blasting their terrible music. They have absolutely no consideration for anyone. It was not always this way, but the good old days are long gone, unfortunately. Story 10. The small engines never stop. Leaf blowing, lawn mowing, chainsaws, snow blowers in winter. It never ends. Story 11. The door-to-door solicitors. I have signs up. They walk up, knock, read the sign and messages calling them out, laugh, take pictures, and disturb my wife while she is working. If I can identify the company, I leave them a 1-star review with screenshots from my camera and pictures of the signs they ignored. Story 12. There is a dog park a mile down the road, but people keep walking their dogs off leash in the public park in my neighborhood. They do not pick up after their dogs either. Story 13. No sidewalks. Many, if not most, of the old neighborhoods or subdivisions in my city were built without them. Newer ones have sidewalks, but the cheapness and short-sightedness from the past is really unfortunate. Story 14. There is an elementary school in my neighborhood. Every weekday, parents line every street around the school and block the road. Signs have been put up to stop people, but they are ignored. I understand wanting to pick up your children, but many of these people are very unobservant. It is a road, not a parking lot. Story 15. I live in a master-planned community. It is really nice and upscale with many amenities. The thing that annoys me is that it takes 12 minutes just to get out of the neighborhood. Story 16. My neighbors, most of them, fail to bring their empty trash cans in from the curb after trash day. Some also bring them out a few days early, which allows bears to rampage through them and spill refuse all over the road. The mess never gets cleaned up properly. It makes no sense to me. Story 17. One of my old neighbors was a drug user and a hoarder. Being one or the other is tolerable, but both is difficult. Now all the junk is broken down into bits and pieces. They try to use parts from an old rotted sink and vanity lying in the front yard to fix a faulty vacuum they cannot even use because their floor is not visible. A for creative effort, F for good neighbor. Story 18. Loose dogs and people intentionally letting their dogs hang out in the front yard, porch, or garage. If you dare bike or walk by, they instantly try to charge you or bark aggressively. Owners will say, "Don't worry, he is friendly." As if that is supposed to help my anxiety. Why can't I walk in peace when I pay so much to live in a good area? 99% of the time, those dogs have zero recall, and the owner runs in circles trying to get the dog back inside. Story 19. It's a catch-22 because I love and hate this aspect at the same time. It's about how far away I am. It's a 20 to 25-minute drive on rural back roads before you reach anything resembling a main roadway or highway. I have to pad departure times accordingly. If work starts at 8 o'clock, there is no leaving at 7:30 or 7:45. But I also love being out of the way in the quiet. No sirens at all hours. No constant traffic past my house. No horns or loud stereos. Story 20. Recently moved to a rural neighborhood and love it. But one of my neighbors has a rooster that will not stop crowing and has a strange, dying crow that it repeats all day and all night. Our friends have roosters and they barely crow. When they do, it sounds like a normal cock-a-doodle-doo that you hear in movies. There is something wrong with my neighbor's rooster because it does not sound like that. Story 21. The fact that my neighbors always have a car parked on the street in front of my house. I know it is legal and there is nothing I can do about it, but it is unpleasant to see their old minivan every time I look out the windows. Story 22. A quiet neighborhood can be disturbed by one family who has 5 lifted trucks, 9 dirt bikes, 3 recreational vehicles, and 2 wakeboard boats in their front yard. They play Creed and Metallica all night while working on the camshafts of their 1978 Trans Ams on their front lawn. All their children have mullets and wear Def Leppard t-shirts. Story 23. Teenagers who ride their bicycles, scooters, or skateboards on the road at night, wearing dark clothing, are difficult to see until you are very close to them. They often do not move out of the way for cars until the last moment. Additionally, some drivers speed up and down the street, creating a dangerous situation. Story 24. My neighbors like to blow their leaf litter onto my yard, so I put up a fence for that, and their son gives off unsettling vibes. Now their leaf litter stays in their yard. Story 25. People driving by in obnoxious, loud, modified cars, trucks, and motorcycles, or playing music that rattles the windows. I just don't get it. Why is that a thing? It's unrefined, ignorant, and not cool. Buy a muffler and turn down the music. Thanks for letting me vent. I feel better now. Story 26. The house I live in is on a corner, and our corner is a school bus stop. There are parents who sit there for 30 to 45 minutes waiting for the bus to drop off their children. If you have that much time, why don't you pick them up at the school? Story 27. Small rural town. Across the street, people let their chihuahua roam freely throughout the entire town. He usually wears a collar. It is not a busy area at all, but still annoying nonetheless. I have chickens, and the dog thinks they are fun to chase. Story 28. A family on my street runs an auto body business from their home, which is fine, except they take up all of the street parking. They do not park in their own driveway or garage because they use that space for the business. That means 4 cars on the street. Husband, wife, adult child, and an extra car. Plus they park cars they are not currently working on along the street. Story 29. There is one person I met during my time at post-secondary who managed to annoy me greatly. Cocky, arrogant, and an absolute tool. This was 15 years ago. He just moved into my neighborhood, and I see him all the time when I am walking the dogs. Story 30. Cul-de-sac. So annoying when visitors arrive at another house and honk repeatedly until the person getting picked up goes outside. I hate it. Story 31. 20 years ago, we moved to a quiet spot in the country, thinking we had found our peaceful forever home. But right next door stood a house that did not just have bad luck. It seemed to host a rotating cast straight out of a social experiment gone wrong. First came the family with 3 boys. The youngest was a walking target, always tormented by his older brothers. His tears practically soaked into the drywall. One night, without a word, the entire family skipped town and left the bank holding the mortgage. Next came the father's grown son from a previous marriage. He arrived with 6 children and 3 extras they were babysitting. The house echoed with non-stop screams of a little girl who seemed to cry just for air. They were squatting with no utilities and ran a gas generator day and night until they were finally evicted. The house hit auction limbo, then a new set of owners took over. They brought hope and power tools. For 2 years, it was hammering from sunrise to dusk. The place was a wreck, and despite the renovation marathon, no one seemed to want it. Eventually, the college-aged niece moved in and treated it like her personal fraternity house. All-night parties, random people coming and going, until one day the fun fizzled out. After her, the owner's adult son and his girlfriend moved in. They were actually quiet and respectful. Maybe the house was finally settling down. No, they left, and the last 2 years have brought the worst chapter yet. A friend of the owner's, a man who served 10 years in prison for molesting his 4-year-old granddaughter, now calls it home. He is creepy. I do not talk to him. I do not even look in that direction. One day I will hit the lottery, and when I do, I will buy that cursed pile of lumber and set it free with a bulldozer. Story 32. I live on a fully residential, fairly narrow 2-way street with cars parked on both sides. People constantly speed down it at 40 miles per hour to use it as a cut-through. There are children on my block, and I always worry that they will get hit by a driver who does not even live here. Story 33. The Horde of Cats. I am a huge cat lover and volunteer with rescues. I have my own kitties. I despise the cats all over the neighborhood that are left without being spayed or neutered. The babies are making babies, and they get left outside to get hit by cars. I have to drive past the remains multiple times a day. I strongly dislike my neighbors who do not take care of their pets. Story 34. A group of people who either know each other or belong to the same family all moved into about 8 different houses in a small area. They like to have loud parties all the time. Loud as in I can be sitting in my living room with over-the-ear headphones on playing a game like Doom, and can still hear their music perfectly. Story 35. My next-door neighbor is extremely annoying when it comes to his yard. All he does is complain about how all the other yards look. Story 36. Gossip. If you pass gas at one end of the city, the information at the other end is that you had an accident immediately. Story 37. Homeowners association violations are not frequent, but when the entire neighborhood receives one because of brown lawns in the middle of a drought, that is a problem. We have had 2 this year. All of our yards have sprinklers, but we cannot keep them running for hours just to bring the grass back to life. It has not rained in weeks. Even the common areas are brown. And dog waste everywhere. We have a dog park and plenty of trails to walk on with dog waste stations. They provide bags and waste bins. There is no reason for daily complaints about residents not picking up after their dogs. I had a dog. I understood the responsibility. He died last year, and yet there is always dog waste in my yard. Story 38. After reading this thread, I have amazing neighbors. The only thing I can really complain about is some people not picking up their dog waste. But even this is not as bad as it could be. Story 39. People who do not put their dogs on a leash. We are not out in the country. We are in the suburbs of a major city. My dog does not do well with other dogs. He was brutally attacked by a dog that got out years ago, so I put him on a leash every time. However, there are about 5 dog owners I see every day who think their dog is special and does not need a leash. They believe they are cool for having an off-leash city dog. My dog will bite yours. I will kick your dog if it runs toward us. I am very close to calling animal control, I swear. Story 40. The people with cars on the street that never move are annoying. There are not many in my neighborhood, but they are super dirty, and trash just collects underneath. Story 41. I used to be on the neighborhood council of my town. It is a really nice area, but at each monthly council meeting, all I ever witnessed were elderly retired millionaires complaining over the smallest things. For example, a new tall building was about to be constructed, and several council members complained about the shadow it would cast and how it would be an eyesore at a certain time of day. It was such an embarrassing moment that I stopped attending meetings after that. Not far from us, there are homeless people and people who cannot find jobs. Yet we were complaining about a shadow being an eyesore from 4 to 7 p.m. Story 42. The man who likes to bring his large pit bull outside while he spends time in his front yard walks the dog off leash on a busy street with his toddler, right on my running route. Of course, the dog is not fixed. Story 43. The neighbor feeds the stray cats, so they hang around and spill over into our yard. They have also found a way under our house. They spray so it smells like cat urine, and at least one is heavily pregnant. She told my child they are not her cats. Why are you feeding them then? Story 44. When my neighbors walk their mules across my lawn and the mules defecate on my lawn, then it settles and massive plots of grain grow where the mules defecated. Story 45. We have a lady with a sweet border collie dog that barks a little. Not even that bad, when people walk by. The dog is just trying to say hi. It is not snarling or aggressive. Every time the dog barks, she comes outside and says, "No, no, be nice. No barking, no barking. Calm down." But she yells louder than the dog is barking. If you are not going to bother training the dog or doing something about it, just let the dog bark and say hi. It is better than barking and then you yelling at it from the porch. Story 46. My neighbor never takes their garbage and recycling bins back to his yard, leaving them on the street for 3 days or more. It is petty, possibly, but very annoying. Story 47. Creepy neighborhood lives in a completely boarded-up house next door. There is a trailer in the front yard blocking the front door and the porch. The side yard on my side has a car parked right up to my property line in front. There is a small cement mixer in the backyard, rusting away in the overgrown grass. In spring and summer, I have to watch for snakes that come from his yard into mine. The worst thing that bothers me is the generator. He runs it at all hours of the day and night, with no regard for how close the houses are or who might be trying to sleep. I cheer out loud whenever it runs out of fuel and stops. I have been thinking of calling the city about code violations just to see if we can get him to shut it off. Is it legal to live in a house with no apparent electricity? Story 48. I live a few blocks from a large high school, and teenage drivers are a menace. I see accidents all the time within a 10-block radius. Story 49. The man 2 houses down who mows his lawn once a month puts up hundreds of Christmas decorations each year. He leaves them up until May and then drags them into a huge pile that he occasionally mows around. His trash cans are always left at the curb all week and often blow into the road. His entire property looks untidy. Story 50. There is a small shopping center at the end of our street with about 9 stores, but 4 have been vacant for over 10 years. The 2 anchor stores are a large Wawa and a Rite Aid. Wawa paid to refurbish the entire shopping center, and it looks beautiful, but the owner does not seem to make any effort to find tenants for the vacant stores. Now, the Rite Aid will be closing eventually, so I am interested to see if that motivates the owner to take action. Story 51. My next-door neighbor uses his leaf blower in his yard every day. He seems to time it only when I am sitting down to relax. Story 52. Speeding and running stop signs seem like suggestions rather than requirements. Loud cars are also an issue. Why is this happening? Story 53. How wet it is. We are a low-lying area just off the Chesapeake Bay, barely above sea level. Any little rainstorm causes standing water everywhere. Yards, some roads, and more. We do not have drainage sewers in the town, only roadside ditches, which can be a problem for some drivers. Our yard is set back in the woods and is always damp, taking days for the ground to dry out unless another rain comes along. Story 54. The Homeowners Association consists of nosy and idle individuals who are likely upset that their children and grandchildren no longer communicate with them. Story 55. They keep expanding and building more houses, but they are not fixing the roads for traffic or building more stores. Every time I go to the gas station or grocery store, they are out of almost everything I am there for. Sold out. There are too many people and not enough products or road space. It is getting way too crowded. It used to take me 6 minutes to get to work in the mornings. Takes me 21 minutes now. Story 56. The gang of deer that roam the neighborhood treat my garden and flower beds like a salad bar. I grew tomato plants with the kids, and they didn't even have the decency to eat the tomatoes. They just took bites out of all of them. My little boy went outside to throw something in the trash can and almost got mowed down by the whole herd. My neighbor's dog barks at them nonstop when left in the backyard. I often hear noises outside my bedroom window, which causes me to get up and confirm it is the deer, not a crazed psycho killer clown or something. I fell asleep with the front door open and the glass door shut, only to be awakened by what sounded like someone rummaging around the front porch. I ran to the front door and came face to face with a buck working on my flower pot by the door. I don't know who got more scared, the deer or me. I hollered and fell back, and he retreated only to slip and fall on the porch. He then proceeded to knock everything in the vicinity over before getting his hooves back under him. Stupid deer. Story 57. Not so much the neighborhood itself, but my next-door neighbor. She is 72, lives alone with 2 dogs, and prides herself on knowing almost everyone on the block and what they do. She knows when I let my dogs out, when I go to work, when I stop home for lunch, and when I get home from work. Basically my whole schedule. Whenever I go outside, either front or backyard, she almost always makes it a point to come outside to talk, gossip, or ask if I can do some kind of favor for her. If it was once in a while, I would not mind, but it is almost every single time I step outside my house. I am kind of an introverted person and sometimes have a hard time saying no to people or cutting a conversation short because I do not want to come off as rude. She is a nice person overall, but definitely has difficult traits and is not shy about making a racist joke or comment, which makes me very uncomfortable. I understand she is older and perhaps lonely, but it absolutely drives me nuts. Story 58. The street next to mine has dogs that bark throughout the night at each other, and no one ever makes them quiet. It drives me insane, but having more ambient noise in my house has helped a bit. I really wish people were more considerate about their untrained dogs causing a disturbance. Story 59. My upstairs neighbor always wants favors and help with things. It sounds innocent enough, so I helped him every time he asked for the first few months. But 4 years later, it is becoming frustrating. He is not old, disabled, or unemployed, just too lazy to learn to do anything himself. I have hung pictures, moved furniture, and fixed his fence. This is the definition of giving him an inch and he will take a mile. Story 60. My neighbors are, the only phrase that fits is white trash. There is a lot that bugs me about them, but the constant foul language, especially from their children, is seriously irritating. Yesterday, I listened to a girl who can't be more than 11 go on a profanity-laden bender for 10 minutes because one of the adults told her to stop using a scooter that has no brakes. Story 61. The neighbors have large security lights that are motion activated. They face our bedrooms, so when stray cats walk near the brick walls, the lights illuminate the room even though the blinds are closed. Story 62. It's impossible to get a good sandwich for less than $18 and wait more than 30 minutes. I'm not some kind of hoagie, grinder, or sub-sandwich snob either. I just want a sandwich where the meat tastes like it came from an animal and not a factory, on bread that is not chokingly dry because it is so old. Story 63. No sidewalks. I have to drive to the local park or the mall to go walking because my feet are unsteady. If I walk down my road, I have to watch my feet the entire time. Story 64. They shout to each other from 50 to 100 feet away. It is an apartment complex, and they even shout from porch to porch. Story 65. A few years ago, my neighbor's then-boyfriend called emergency services on me for allegedly mowing 6 inches past the property line, accusing me of trespassing. Story 66. People do not know how to park properly to maximize the number of cars that can fit on the street. People leave spaces that are not quite big enough for a car to fit but enough to make it look like there is space available. Story 67. Neighbors who make no attempt to maintain their property. Not minimal maintenance, but no attempt at all. You could lose a car in their weeds. Honorable mention to the neighbor who only brings out his Harley on early Sunday mornings. Story 68. Someone in my neighborhood owns a rooster. It turns out they do not just crow when the sun comes up. They crow as long as the sun is up. I live in a city, and I am pretty sure roosters are illegal to own as pets here, but I do not actually know which neighbor it is. Story 69. People walked their dogs off leash. My dog and I watched as a dog came charging across the road to play with her. It was hit by a car and killed instantly. Thankfully, my dog is not one to dart onto the road, but I remember looking down at my white knuckles clutching her leash. I will never forget the way that owner screamed when her dog was hit. To be blunt, it was completely her own fault. Story 70. My neighbors. The people who park across from the end of my driveway. The person who called the police on my child for walking while brown. My next-door neighbor who complains about me getting my groceries delivered instead of taking half an hour to go get them. Never mind that my mother-in-law's strong brand loyalty means I need to shop at 3 or 4 stores and it takes all day. It is none of his business anyway. The person who rings doorbells to tell people that she thinks their grass is too long, even in the dead of winter. I hate my neighbors. Story 71. It's a shortcut between 2 major streets that saves about 1 minute of driving time. Sometimes it is very busy with traffic, and people do not drive carefully. Story 72. My 2 neighbors at the end of our block are stereotypical Goombas. They speak in one volume, scream. Their favorite word, a curse word. Their favorite topic, screaming absolute vitriol at their wives and about Donald Trump winning. Their favorite location, their stoop. Every single evening from 7 p.m. until 10 p.m. They sometimes change it up by talking about which type of non-white Italian person they hate. Honking their car horn for a solid minute until the other one comes out of their house just to banter with each other while holding up traffic. Walking around with a Glock clipped to their basketball shorts and screaming at the world's most annoying miniature pincher that also loves screaming constantly. It's like living next to Tony Soprano but without any of the class. Story 73. The neighbor comes home thumping his bass loudly enough to feel while lying in bed every night of the week. Also, I don't go to bed until 1 or 2 in the morning. Story 74. The selfishness. I live in a small affluent town, and the amount of self-serving grandiose attitudes is amazing. We have a massive traffic issue from 2:30 to 4 p.m. every day because everyone drives their kids to school, and the main road is only 2 lanes. We had a measure on the recent ballot to have school buses take the kids. This would free up traffic by 50%. It did not pass by 95% because, heaven forbid, their precious kids take a public school bus. Story 75. Some people avoid eye contact at any cost, especially in apartment settings. Just say hi. It makes things less uncomfortable for everyone. Story 76. All the racists who have become much more comfortable with their racism. I have been called the N-word by 3 different people in the last 2 years. And I am not even black, not that it would be any better, obviously. Story 77. Wind chimes. People hang them without concern for how they affect others. The constant noise makes it difficult to open windows, all because someone who never opens a window decides to hang noisemakers. So rude. Story 78. The brothels are not notable because they exist, but rather because of the speeding Alfred cars carrying government ministers and wealthy elderly men in Yoshiwara. Story 79. I'm from the neighborhood. I'm in the suburbs. I don't mind the neighborhood, but I like knowing what to expect. During COVID-19, many of the young boys in my neighborhood decided they wanted to be criminals, and now there are shootings every so often, which is unfortunate in itself, but they are not even skilled at crime. An old classmate of mine who should not have been involved in illegal activities was shot through his front door. The perpetrators were seen in broad daylight, so they drove him to the hospital. They do not even know how to carry out a proper drive-by. To be clear, I am not condoning violent crime. It is violent and criminal. I'm just saying, being a violent criminal is bad enough, but to be a bad one on top of all that, especially when you have no dire need to be in this lifestyle, is just embarrassing. Story 80. Where I live, it is very busy, and it is turning into a city. Many people from New York are moving here because of the coronavirus pandemic. People can be unpleasant when you're driving. However, I have rent control. Story 81. There's a property across the street from me, and the owner uses it as a warehouse to store pieces of cotton. All day long, I hear transfer trucks and forklifts, and they wake us at 7 a.m. The docks are so close that the windows even rattle. We were robbed a while back because people would watch our homes from that property. I am afraid to leave my home. When they deconstructed the property, we were infested by mice. We have even called the zoning office. My other neighbor is the only one out here. They had a trucker knock on their door after dark, and the baby saw the person and ran to answer it. My husband and I are in our golden years. We cannot even sit on the front porch of our home without enduring this all day long. Story 82. Neighbors let their large dogs out off leash. I do not know if the dog is friendly or not because it is a scary feeling to walk my 10-pound dog and have an 80-pound dog run up to me unexpectedly. Thankfully, they have all been sweet and playful, but it is a temporary heart attack. Also, everyone has a gated backyard, so I genuinely do not understand the appeal of letting your dog off leash in public areas. Story 83. The storm drain in the right-of-way broke, and the city billed the residents in the neighborhood to repair it, instead of using the general infrastructure fund supported by taxpayers. Story 84. The sudden resurgence of a small group of drug users. I no longer feel safe going into my fenced-in backyard with our young children alone. I only take them outside if my husband is home. It is disappointing because we have an excellent swing set for them, but I have to say no when the oldest asks to go outside if my husband is not home. Story 85. Next-door neighbor leaves piles of peanuts for squirrels. Why does the "please do not feed the animals" rule in national parks not apply to urban areas? Story 86. No sidewalks or streetlights. It is a fairly suburban neighborhood with many walkable amenities nearby. You just have to use the road and a flashlight to walk there. Story 87. Someone put a plastic bag of dog waste in my empty garbage bin. If I hadn't seen her do it, I wouldn't have looked, and then I would have tossed a big bag of used cat litter on it and had to clean dog waste out of my bin. Why leave the bag? Just carry it home. I don't want your waste. Story 88. Wow. This thread has me appreciating my quiet elderly neighbors. I will say, the woman across the street has a lamp at the end of her driveway that is on all the time, day or night. It shines through our front windows into our bedroom. She also has a motion sensor light on the side of her house set to the most sensitive setting. Every time a car drives past, it goes on. So every night, it is on and off repeatedly with the motion sensor light. Story 89. Crime. I live in Westport in Kansas City, which is a cool spot and not particularly run down, but it is also crime-ridden. Gunshots happen all the time. My apartment has a sealed parking garage that requires a key card to enter, and I have still had my car broken into twice. My girlfriend came over a week ago and said she saw someone get shot in the street during the daytime. I was shocked and looked for it in the news. It made the news, but it was such a common occurrence that it received only a few sentences. I realized that I called it not particularly run down and then described some concerning things, but if you ask someone what neighborhoods to avoid in Kansas City, I don't think Westport would even be in the top 5. It is not even considered the bad part of town. Story 90. The police tracking cameras. I cannot leave my neighborhood without being time-stamped and recorded every time I leave and return. Story 91. That LED sign on a church is as bright as the sun. I live on a country road. There is no reason for it, and it is ruining my nighttime peace and tranquility. Story 92. The constant barking of dogs is overwhelming. Everyone seems to have dogs. I used to like dogs, but now they are everywhere, and many people are bad pet owners who allow their dogs to bark incessantly late at night. I am starting to feel like neighborhoods are overrated. Story 93. When the neighbors park their cars in front of my house, and all the dogs are constantly barking, including mine. Story 94. The chainsaw noise occurs every weekend. I live in an area with large gardens and many trees. It is not enjoyable when I am trying to relax outside on a sunny day. Story 95. Constant water pipe breaks. The neighborhood is great, good people, and we take care of our homes. However, the whole street is covered with patches of concrete where water pipes have broken. The pipes are old, and the city refuses to update them. We have had 4 breaks this year, and it is only June. They will not send anyone out unless a group of neighbors, 4 or more, calls daily. Other than that, I love the neighborhood. Story 96. People running around the neighborhood, so I cannot cross any intersections. Please run around the block to avoid interfering with traffic. Story 97. A lot of mentally ill people pass by every day, yelling about various things. I feel bad for them, but it is also very annoying. Story 98. They all voted to install speed bumps along my boulevard. Now it is annoying to drive up and down, and there are ugly signs posted. They say it is for safety. If they all used their 2 to 3 car garages for their vehicles instead of storing garbage and stopped parking along the road, it would be much safer for bicycles, pedestrians, and children playing. Story 99. I wouldn't say it drives me absolutely crazy, but I spend a lot of time dodging people who are begging. They approach you directly and sometimes won't let you just move out of the way. They are not necessarily homeless, just poor. They like to hang out outside CVS Pharmacy, 7-Eleven, bagel shops, McDonald's, liquor stores, and similar places. CVS Pharmacy is the worst because it seems like they take shifts there, and I shop there frequently. I know someone who won't walk in front of that CVS Pharmacy at night. Instead, he walks behind the block, which is actually kind of deserted. I don't have any money to give them either. Additionally, I was physically accosted by one last year, so I prefer to avoid interactions with them. Story 100. Honestly, it is more of an apartment complex than a neighborhood. I hate how unsafe it feels. I am in fear every time I take a step outside my home. Story 101. Sometimes there are dogs running loose. It is a mountain town, so I understand wanting to give your dog some freedom, but I get nervous if I have my baby and my dog on a walk at the same time. There are 3 dogs that are out regularly, and it endangers the dogs, drivers, and wildlife. It really bothers me. Story 102. 2 things. Allowing dogs to run around the neighborhood urinating and defecating on other people's property. I put up a garden fence to stop the dog from urinating on my furniture. There is one child whose mother does not parent at all. The child is rude, disrespectful, violent, and does not understand the word no. Story 103. I live in an apartment complex where some units are privately owned and others are rented out by the office. Guess which units are well maintained with people who care about their surroundings. I rent from a private owner, and like the other owners, I keep my place neat, including my patio. The other renters trash their units, do not pick up their dog's waste, and overload the dumpsters with old furniture when they move out. The company that owns the complex does nothing to maintain the grounds. 20 years ago, this complex was a beautiful property, but it has declined significantly. Story 104. There is a very popular restaurant on a hairpin corner with a marina nearby. It is often crowded, but that does not bother me much. It is a great place. However, there is an employee whose mother cannot drive well and drops them off, then stays in the way on a narrow street. My neighborhood is not large but is crowded. The streets require yielding to oncoming traffic. This person just sits in the middle of the road or circles around the block going 5 miles per hour, which might be acceptable in a residential area but only makes it harder for residents to access their driveways. Story 105. Meth labs and dealers aside, it is the lack of boundaries, lack of respect for property, and lack of respect for neighbors. I recently had a next-door neighbor, now evicted, who was dealing drugs, and her friends, who were clients, were constantly cutting through my yard all day and night, right up by my porch. I often found cigarette butts scattered across my yard. I live near a church, and parishioners have climbed up the parking lot retaining wall into my yard, just to bark at my dogs through my privacy fence. They also regularly ram their vehicles into the retaining wall, causing the limestone blocks to become crooked and jutting into my yard. Currently, my biggest annoyance is a neighbor who leaves her cats outside all day, so I have to remove them from my yard before letting my dogs out. She plays her music very loudly, so I hear it inside my house even with the windows closed. It ruins the peace of sitting in my garden to relax after work. Another neighbor who lives across the alley has 5 large breed dogs. Her yard is nothing but mud, and the dogs are left outside barking excessively. When it gets hot, the smell of the dog waste becomes unbearably strong. Story 106. Occasional loud noise issues from neighbors aside, my biggest minor annoyance about my neighborhood that drives me insane is that I need to walk 15 to 20 minutes to reach a sidewalk. I am from the United Kingdom and live in the United States now, and it is mind-blowing to me that anywhere does this around residential areas. Story 107. People drive down the streets like absolute lunatics. The speed limit is 60 kilometers per hour, and people go at 80 to 90 kilometers per hour. It is unreal. Story 108. People with loud engines lighting it up down my street when I am falling asleep. I live on a main road with a long straightaway, and it makes the nerves in my back go nuts. Story 109. Nobody knows each other. I have lived next to the same people for 17 years, and none of us know each other. It is so strange. Story 110. Neighbors and young children ride a hot rod with an all-terrain vehicle up and down the road in front of the houses. This is illegal on the county highway. They then go down the farm road beside our property and follow it behind our house. We can sit next to each other on our deck and cannot hear each other because the all-terrain vehicle has been modified to be extra loud. Story 111. People driving everywhere with their small children in modified golf carts on main roads. Story 112. The non-stop loud barking from the neighbor's dog and banda music playing all weekend and some weekdays. Story 113. My neighborhood is so quiet and calm that many people believe it is okay to walk their dogs without leashes. Then chaos ensues because dogs go missing or get hit by cars. This is irresponsible. Story 114. In our neighborhood, it's the tweens and teens. We live in a nice upper-medium subdivision in the United States. There is so much vandalism, attitude, and entitlement, it is sickening. Those who have camera footage call out the parents, and the responses are, "What? Kids can't be kids anymore? I'm sure you did way worse. It's just kids. At least they're outside. That is my kids." My favorite, though, was, "Hey, I have been meaning to let the neighborhood know that my kid will be going around selling coupon cards to raise money for the class Disney trip. We are trying to teach him responsibility, so he will be going out by himself. Please be kind and generous. Thanks." Story 115. The house next to mine always puts their trash bins and yard debris in front of our house on pickup day. This has been going on for several years. I do not say anything because it is technically a public sidewalk, but it makes us look messy and lazy when the bins stay there for days. The house is a short-term rental, so I assume it is something the owner insists on. It is minor, and I do not get very upset about it. But it is an annoyance. Story 116. My neighbor is nosy as F. She peeks through her blinds every time I am outside doing anything. I think she believes she is not being seen. Get a life, you fool. My life is not that interesting. Story 117. School traffic is unnecessary, especially when most of the children live within walking distance. Story 118. We live on a small dead-end road with about 11 houses, and people still drive as if they stole their cars. It is a neighborhood with many children. Story 119. We got lucky. All our neighbors are quiet and do not let their dogs out for long. It is a cul-de-sac, so it is quiet. Story 120. People walking in the street when there are perfectly good sidewalks on both sides. Then they glare at you when you drive by, as if to indicate they are annoyed that someone would use a vehicle on their walking road. Story 121. Probably the reckless drivers. Today I had 2 cars speeding and passing me in my small neighborhood where the speed limit is 10 to 15 miles per hour, all to save themselves half a second. Story 122. Because there are multiple golf courses nearby, there are golf carts. This in itself would not be a problem except the children are allowed to drive them everywhere. None of them have any concept of traffic rules or safe driving. Story 123. I live in an apartment complex that has one entrance and exit. I cannot stand having to leave or come back when the school buses are around. It takes forever to get through. There is a small area for them to pull over to pick up and drop off the kids. but there is no barrier separating it from the main road, so we cannot pass. Traffic gets backed up while we all have to wait on these kids. There are at least 3 different buses that come through, and sometimes they arrive one after the other. We could be sitting there for 10 to 15 minutes before we are cleared to go. It is incredibly frustrating. To be clear, I do not blame the kids. I know they have no control over it. Whoever is in charge of planning the bus stops and whoever coordinates that on the apartment's end needs to do better. Story 124. The construction workers building the condominium down the block park all around the alley exit, so you cannot see anything over their large trucks when you are trying to exit the alley. Also, all the people who move in and then cut down the mature trees in their yards. There are 50 neighborhoods around the city limits that have no trees. Move into one of those. Enjoy a large house with no tree cover and leave the mature neighborhoods alone. Story 125. I grew up in this neighborhood. Originally, it was all heavily wooded, with most yards boasting many trees and dense foliage. It also had a large undeveloped wooded area filled with bike trails carved through it by the local children. When a developer finally bought and built up that area, we lost our woodland adventure space. Instead of matching the woodsy atmosphere of the rest of the neighborhood, the area was clear-cut for new houses, with only decorative landscape trees remaining. From satellite images, it appears as an over-landscaped scar amid the remaining woods. Story 126. The amount of construction has been ongoing for over a year, and I honestly do not know what they are fixing. Story 127. Everyone parks on the street. What are you doing with your garages? Why can't you park inside? Why does your car need to be on the street? At least park in your own driveway. Story 128. The cougar that prowls on the hill. Also, the bear across the street that messes with the trash. There is also a large number of ticks. Story 129. I live on a fairly busy road with 2 bars at either end. The number of drunk driving accidents we have is extremely high. Just last week, someone almost killed a food delivery driver and crashed into a tree in front of my house. I have a video of my encounter with the drunk driver. Story 130. The life-size Donald Trump cutouts are all over my neighbor's lawn. I am in Ocean County, New Jersey. It is very disappointing. Story 131. One of my neighbors, for whatever reason, takes their kids outside every Sunday morning, weather permitting. They all scream woo at each other for a solid 5 to 10 minutes and then go back inside. I wish I were making this up, but it has become a part of my life, and I am almost too afraid to ask them to stop or why they do it at this point. Even the dads are yelling woo. I have looked out back, and they are just kind of doing nothing, maybe spinning or running around while doing it, but no actual activity. They are just outside going nuts on a day I could sleep in if not for them. Story 132. The neighbors' garages are full of junk they bought and do not need, and the streets are full of cars and trucks. Story 133. Racist and homophobic supporters of the Make America Great Again movement. Pretty much all of them. I do my best to be polite to everyone, but I do not really have any friends because of that. It is very lonely. Story 134. There are 3 topics or questions I see constantly posted. 1. What is the helicopter saying? Did anybody hear those gunshots or were those fireworks? I saw a coyote. Keep your pets safe. I cannot understand what the announcer on the helicopter is saying either. Call the police and ask. Visit a shooting range and try a gun to learn what it really sounds like. If you live in an area where coyotes are present, take safety precautions. Story 135. Public transportation is not as easy or accessible as in other parts of the city or island. We are a large suburb with a high population density. The buses should run more frequently than they currently do. Additionally, the metro and subway stations are few and very far apart. It is also discouraging that many younger families, including those my age or younger, continue to hold racist and homophobic views. They support the Maple MAGA movement despite living in a highly diverse community. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.